I'm speaking on behalf of Against Hate, a newly formed campus body that opposes hate and oppression of all forms. However, the phrase against hate holds a more profound personal significance to me. You see, on the 2nd of January 2000, my mother, Ravi Veriah, died at the hands of a racist, negligent doctor in Hong Kong. There are few things in this world as harrowing and painful as a child losing their mother. During my childhood years, her death was a source of immense grief, clawing away at my existence, forcing endless sleepless nights filled only by the sound of a light sobbing. For many years, I retreated from the world into a cocoon of pain and grief. But slowly, that sorrow evolved. It forged an inner strength that only an inferno of grief can mold. It instilled in me a profound sense of justice. The question of how to achieve justice for my mother's death consumes me. Initially, there was a lengthy court case in Hong Kong that ended in an unsatisfactory settlement. Those responsible for my mother's death did not face consequences at the hands of the law. From a young age, therefore, I was first forced to learn that the law is a limited source of justice. Reflecting on my sorrow, I realized that true justice must extend far beyond prison sentences or reparations. For me, true justice for my mother's death meant no future child losing their mother at the hands of racism, no future child having to feel that crushing grief, no future child having to look longingly across the playground at all those complete halcyon families. True justice therefore involved the impossible, dismantling the systems of racist oppression that sully all societies. I grew to learn, however, that for my mother's death, racism was only part of a more profound issue facing humanity: hatred. My ideal of justice therefore opposed all systems perpetuating the destruction and domination implicit in hatred. True justice, therefore, is against hate. And I believe that most here today are primarily protesting hate. This vast, inspiring protest does not oppose the democratic process, a Republican president, nor conservatism. So many hundreds are not galvanized by Trump's crass actions towards Russia and China or his unique Twitter habits. Rather, it is his hate that mobilizes us. His proposed ban on Muslims entering America, his birther lie, his racist law and order rhetoric, his demeaning approach towards Latinos, his sexual assaults. And by protesting in the name of true justice against hate, we stand here as forebears of an immensely powerful historical tradition. American 20th century history has one of the world's most powerful and successful traditions of fighting oppression and hate. Britain certainly does not compare. Martin Luther King, Harvey Milk, Betty Friedan, Shirley Chisholm, Angela Davies, Fred Hampton, Malcolm X. And looking further afield, we protest hate here today, just as Gandhi fought against the British truth that normalized oppression and violence. We protest here today just as my grandfather Karam Singh fought against the British oppression in Malaysia. And further, by vociferously arguing against hate, we stand by all those who have fallen victim to hatred. We stand with the hundreds of millions who died at the hands of slavery. We stand with the centuries of LGBT figures who have fallen victim to systems of homophobic oppression. We stand with all minority communities who have faced persecution at the hands of the tyranny of the majority. And we stand with my mother, whose life was cruelly stolen at the age of 33. And further, by arguing against hate, we place ourselves within the resurgent majority of the world. As Tocqueville famously noted in 1840, the passion for equality is every day gaining ground in the human heart. The tide of human history leads us away from hate towards love. Desmond Tutu was not pronouncing a vacuous axiom when he expounded that love is stronger than hate. Anyone who has felt the sharp sting of love must agree with the bishop. Today, therefore, we assert the fundamental democratic right to protest against hate and oppression. We stand with all those across Europe and America who are fighting the rising tides of anger that are sweeping the Western world. We stand with our family in England, fighting the rising xenophobia and Islamophobia in the wake of a Brexit vote. We stand with our family in France, fighting the far right of Le Pen. We stand with our family in Hungary, fighting the far right of Orban. And we stand with our family in Germany, fighting the painful resurgence of a far right wing. There may be decay and setbacks, but love and compassion ultimately surpass hate. Despite the threat of another low, dishonest decade across the Western world, love remains stronger than hate. The course of human equality never did run smooth. But to end here would be a disservice to my mother. So far, I've discussed hate insofar as it relates to identity politics. However, coming from a dirt poor background in Malaysia, she understood economics as the primary axis of oppression. For her, chicken was a treat to be enjoyed once every 2 weeks. This rugged upbringing instilled in her a deep compassion towards the poor. My father often describes, with nostalgic tears of joy in his wrinkled eyes, how with me in her arms, my mother would stop by every homeless person in a Hong Kong subway, giving each man and woman food and money. Family friends often take me aside to describe my mother's profoundly moving compassion towards society's underdogs. I try unsuccessfully to learn from her example, and I feel more Stanford students should try to do the same. Every single day I hear Stanford students vilifying Trump supporters. They exhibit the same resentment towards these supporters that these supporters often show towards marginalized communities. It is indeed true that the views of many of these supporters are abhorrent. We have heard sad tales of Trump supporters advocating for Muslim concentration camps. However, we would do well to remember Gandhi's words, hate the sin and not the sinner. The racist, misogynistic and homophobic views that many Trump supporters hold are merely symptomatic of systemic white, straight and male supremacy. These systems are so deeply ingrained in society that they afflict us all. The fight therefore is not against Trump's supporters, but against America's systemic oppression, not against the sinners, but against the sin. However, not only is the vilification of Trump supporters an intellectual failure, more profoundly, it is a failure of compassion. Troublingly, the anger of Trump supporters towards the system that has failed them is perhaps more justified than much of a liberal anger towards Trump supporters. Their anger is misdirected, certainly, but it is justified nonetheless. Many of them used to be Democratic Party or British Labour Party supporters. Too often it's forgotten that the white working class form the bedrock of the traditional left wing. The rich, moneyed Hillary Clinton elite that forms the basis of America's current liberal class has never formed the basis of a coherent left wing. And this class has often been too blind to the plight of America's poor. Many Trump supporters have been left behind by globalization and economic liberalization. The real wages of American industrial workers have remained stagnant for the past few decades. America's vast inequality, fanned by decades of economic neoliberalism, has even created life expectancy inequality. The top 1% typically lives 15 years longer than the bottom 1%. For the jobless and poor, there does not exist a sufficient social safety net. Just as my mother lacks sufficient medical care, too many working class Americans do not have access to quality healthcare, and healthcare is a fundamental human right. Thus, many Trump supporters have endured great hardship and deserve to be treated with respect and compassion, not derision and condescension. All are worthy of our compassion, even those who disagree with us. Trump supporters remain our sisters and brothers, regardless of our views. Compassion is never selective. I've often thought about the doctor who killed my mother. For many years, I dreamt of murdering him, enacting a justified, twisted revenge. Gradually, however, I grew to pity him. I would give up anything to spend 5 minutes with my mother, a woman described by so many as effusive, kind, brilliant, smart. I therefore pity a man whose hatred blinded him from seeing my mother for the brilliant, kind, sensitive human being she was. He was unable to see beyond her brown skin. Racism and hatred, systems of racism and hatred were responsible for my mother's death, not a lone doctor. I have taught myself to hate the sin and not the sinner. I have taught myself to show this troubling man the compassion my mother embodied. And if we are to stand here today in this richest American tradition of fighting against hate, we must not ourselves be blinded by hatred. We must show all compassion, for all are worthy of compassion. And that is the first step towards true justice for my mother, Ravi Veriah, and all other victims of hatred.
Thank you, Ravi, for those incredibly moving words. Next up, we have Eddie Albaran from